Hello, I'm Dango Rose. Welcome to the Mountaineer Podcast, where everybody's listening. The Mountaineer brings you the latest news of the Peak-to-Peak region, in print, online, through our podcast, social media, and special publications. Now, listen in to the latest news of the area with our local journalists.
Hello there, everybody. My name is Jamie Lammers, and welcome to the Mountaineer Podcast. For today's segment, I'm bringing you an audio library for the Thursday, June 26th, 2025 edition of the Mountaineer. Before we get into the articles, here is our top story today, brought to you by Brittany Wagner.
Our top story today comes from Christopher Kelly. Netherland crew rescues driver from creek. The driver of a car that was over 50% submerged in Middle Boulder Creek off Boulder Canyon Road was rescued by firefighters. The car went off the road in the narrows of the canyon just outside the district and was found almost 12 hours after it had crashed. That person is very lucky to be alive, Fire Chief Charlie Schmidtman said. I don't know how they did it, but he threaded the needle between the boulder and the Jersey barrier and went off and down into the creek. Schmidtman described to the board how the car had landed in a blind spot and how responders had to rely on local rock climbers to point the way to the car, whose driver had been trapped from 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. You can read the full story in this week's Mountaineer or at themountaineer.com.
Thank you so much, Brittany, for bringing us our top story. And now for the reading of other stories from the June 26th, 2025 edition of the Mountaineer. A Brief Queer History of Boulder County by Samyukta Sarma. Boulder County. June is Pride Month, a celebration of the progress toward LGBTQ+ rights and the marginalized communities that fight for them in order to live as their true selves. As LGBTQ+ topics once again find themselves at the center of politics, Pride this year may feel like less of a time to celebrate. It's important to remember that Pride is rooted in the hardships that queer people have historically faced and pushed through. A celebration not only of the obstacles already overcome, but also of the strength the community has to keep going. On Wednesday, June 18th, in the middle of Pride Month, the Supreme Court upheld Tennessee's ban on gender-affirming medical care for transgender minors, ruling that the law is not discrimination. On the same day, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, under President Trump, announced that it would be discontinuing the LGBTQ+ youth service line on the National 988 Suicide Hotline on July 17th. This specialized hotline was created in partnership with the Trevor Project, a nationally recognized organization focused on crisis intervention for LGBTQ+ youth. President Trump acknowledged that LGBTQ+ youth are disproportionately at risk of suicide and would benefit from special services during his first term, when he signed the National Suicide Hotline Designation Act of 2020, which introduced 988 as the suicide hotline and established the LGBTQ+ youth service hotline to begin with. SAMSHA also notably removed the T and Q from LGBTQ+ when addressing the discontinuation of the hotline, pointing towards the Trump administration's increasingly overt dismissal of transgender identities, the very identities of some of the most prominent figures of the Pride movement's origins. Pride originated to mark the one-year anniversary of the Stonewall Uprising of 1969, a six-day standoff between LGBTQ+ protesters, including transgender activists Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera, and police in New York City, following one of many police raids on known gay bars. Pride found its way to Colorado not long after, with Denver as a hub for conversation following a self-proclaimed Denver Stonewall at a town hall meeting in 1973, when an organized group of hundreds of queer people spoke on why 4 discriminatory laws should be repealed. With all this well-known history of Pride in metropolises, there's no doubt that queer people were living silently, or perhaps even loudly, in smaller towns across the US, despite historical records indicating that LGBTQ+ topics didn't gain traction in the Peak-to-Peak region until the 90s and early 2000s. Boulder County, on the other hand, occasionally found itself a center of attention on both the state and federal levels. In 1974, some Boulder residents pushed for sexual orientation to be included in the Boulder Human Rights Ordinance, a set of laws to prevent discrimination in housing, employment, and public resources. However, it was overwhelmingly voted down. It also resulted in two prominent Boulder politicians losing their political careers. It wasn't until 1987 that sexual orientation was just barely accepted into the ordinance. In 1975, Boulder County Clerk Clela Rorex issued the first same-sex marriage licenses in the country to 6 couples. Although she was met with aggressive opposition, she continued to hold that she did what she thought was equitable, according to Law Week Colorado. The impassioned debate on whether the licenses should be valid brought national attention to the topic of gay marriage. Boulder County Clerk Hillary Hall followed in Rorex's footsteps, issuing over 200 same-sex marriage licenses over the course of about 3 months in 2014. A ruling in her favor before the legalization effectively granted permission for other county clerks to do the same. And of course, in 1995, Boulder attorney Gene Dubofsky held the legal battle to appeal the enactment of Colorado's Amendment 2 before the Supreme Court. The amendment was voted in in 1992 and established legal precedent preventing the creation of state or local LGBTQ+ anti-discrimination laws in Colorado. Colorado found itself not only in national headlines, but the subject of boycotts around the country in mass support of queer rights. Romer v. Evans, the 1995 appeal, was not only historic for its dismantling of the prevention of LGBTQ+ rights in Colorado, but for being the first time ever that the Supreme Court had ruled against the oppression of LGBTQ+ people, bringing nationwide change thereafter. Newspapers and media can often serve as records of history. Not surprisingly, there was no mention of the words gay, lesbian, or queer in any Boulder or Gilpin County newspaper prior to Stonewall, other than use of the word queer as a synonym for unusual or off-putting. Leading up to and just after Stonewall, newspapers often avoided the topic completely, as it was often deemed inappropriate for widespread readership. From 1970 onwards, the CU Boulder newspaper, the Colorado Daily, began featuring queer topics in their columns. Universities tended to be center points of conversation for topics that larger society deemed radical. On October 2, 1970, an opinion piece ran supporting gay liberation and the creation of a Boulder chapter of the Gay Liberation Front, an international organization started shortly after Stonewall by activists like Marsha P. Johnson. The chapter was founded just a month later, possibly strengthened by this or another article, according to University of Colorado archives. The Boulder Gay Liberation Front wasted no time, starting their own magazine for queer content entitled The Gayly Planet, and publishing their first issue on September 25, 1971. On June 26, 1973, almost 3 years later, the chapter was going strong, cited as a resource in an article from a lesbian mother pleading for a more accepting society so that her child would not have to be afraid about telling others about his home life with 2 moms. On November 5, 1974, one anonymous queer columnist described the use of a homophobic slur by a teaching assistant and another similarly offensive viewpoint from the same class's professor. Soon after, on November 11, 1974, a confusingly both uplifting and offensive response column was published, both repeatedly calling the first student the slur, while telling them that they should be bold enough to live as their true self, despite a society that might make them stand alone. If you are going to be hoping and waiting for someday when the rest of the wishing they were human beings in this society no longer put down everybody who isn't just like them, my slur friend, before you think you can live an open and fulfilling life, then you are going to be waiting a hell of a long time, the columnist wrote. A similar opinion was found in the April 5, 1971 issue, wherein two writers reported on a panel on lesbianism at CU's annual World Affairs Conference. Protests emerged upon community members learning that the conference didn't plan to feature any women panelists to speak on the overtly women-centered topic of lesbianism. The panel was adjusted, but still, when a woman panelist spoke about lesbians being afraid to live as they want in a world where the male ego is prioritized, a male panelist shrugged it off by saying that judgments like that make everyone the enemy. While the earliest records of reporting on queer topics in Boulder County came from CU, newspaper archives indicate that our very own Mountain Ear was among the first in the Peak-to-Peak region. Not surprisingly, but definitely admirably, the conversation was started by a Nederland high school freshman named Billy Henniger. On October 8, 1992, the Mountain Ear published an edition of Henninger's recurring column. This week, he tackled the notion that gay people are inherently different from others. He addressed that most people he knew held homophobic opinions, and that he himself would probably be bullied or labeled gay at school the next day. Despite this, Henninger bravely advocated for gay rights. It makes me sad to have to listen to such ignorance every day when I attend school. But I hope that sometime in the future, if we make it, people wouldn't be so ignorant, he wrote. Henninger's column came just 1 month before voters' approval of Amendment 2 into the Colorado Constitution, and received 2 response articles in agreement, showing that despite state ruling, allyship was to be found in Colorado, and even more locally in Nederland. I have received nothing but acceptance thus far from Nederfolk, one of the things that has endeared this town to me in the short time I've been here, Nederland resident Tara Gray Wolfstar wrote in one of the response columns. I hope that Nederland remains the tolerant, supportive, and diversified community it is now. I'm sure that if we continue to grow kids like Billy, it will. Today, pride can be seen and felt throughout Boulder and Gilpin counties. Not only are residents more outspoken of their support of the LGBTQ+ community, but multiple Pride events took place this June. While these records could never provide a comprehensive history of the struggles and successes of the queer community in the area, they do provide proof of their existence and perseverance, the progress and acceptance from other residents, and the allyship of brave individuals in times when even that was worth prejudice. But the uplifting of the LGBTQ+ community isn't just something to look back on and appreciate. Queer people are still marginalized and their rights are still being threatened today. Pride Month is as good a time as ever to support your queer neighbors. Brad the Cat Finds His Way Home by Mindy Leary. Gilpin County. A gray tabby named Brad has stitched together a tale that's almost too good to be true. Last week, guests at the Pineberry Lodge Retreat in Chalet Park were settling in for a peaceful quilting weekend when an unexpected visitor appeared at their door. He was soft, vocal, persistent, and clearly looking for love. One of the quilters posted his photo to social media. With no immediate claims from neighbors, local animal lover and Mountain Paws and Claws owner Brittany Dixon stepped in to help. A scan for a microchip revealed something no one expected. Brad had a family, but not just any family, a family from the Front Range who lost him 10 years ago. Brad had gone missing from the Littleton area in 2014. His owner, Sanaz Jazzy, had long given up hope. So when she got the call that Brad had been found, she dropped everything and made the drive straight to Gilpin County. Within an hour, the two were finally reunited. Brad's story still has a few mysteries. No one knows where he's been all these years, but it's clear someone had been looking out for him. Efforts are underway to find and thank whoever cared for him during his long journey. As for the quilting group, they've adopted Brad as their honorary mascot. Fittingly, 2014, the year he vanished, was also the year their quilting retreats began. Naturally, he'll be receiving a custom quilt of his very own. a happy ending, a cozy quilt, and one very lucky cat. Monte Lobo provides an alternative by Dave Gibson. Central City. The mountain town of Central City just became a lot more kid-friendly with the opening of Monte Lobo Tacos y Tequila on June 14th. Located in the old Doc Holliday building at 131 Main Street, Monte Lobo, Wolf Mountain, has a large dedicated game room providing entertainment for minors and a non-gambling alternative for those 21 or older. Monte Lobo specializes in arcade games. Skee-Ball, Super Chex Bubble Hockey, Big Buck Hunter, Street Fighter, Super Bikes 3, and Cruisin' Blast are just a few of them. For $0.25, you could try the claw machine. If you were adroit enough, you might latch onto a stuffed animal. Jill Hansen and her daughter Kelly and granddaughter Paige were visiting from Omaha. Kelly and Paige engaged in a closely contested game of Pac-Man. The interior of the building is a massive 42,000 square feet, making it the largest historic building in Central City. The space affords plenty of elbow room, unlike the sometimes crowded feel of casinos. The pressed tin ceilings, woodwork, wallpaper, and big windows overlooking the cobblestone street give a late 19th century ambiance. Having worked in the area for over 20 years, Chef Herminio Rodriguez's much sought-after services have often gone to the highest bidder. He signed on with Monte Lobo this year, bringing savory goodness to the food. People are already lining up to sample his culinary masterpieces. Elotes are a sweet mixture of corn, butter, mayonnaise, and spices served in a cup or bowl. Laced with homemade salsa and garnished in cilantro, Rodriguez's street tacos are out of this world. Several delicious varieties are offered: steak, chicken, pork, and chorizo sausage, with more to come. The Al Pastor taco contains marinated pork and pineapple. Yarritos, sodas, or a Mexican Coke made with pure cane sugar complement the dining experience. To top off your meal, an ice cream cone is a tasty dessert. The expansive bar stretches from east to west in one of the rooms. Bartender Kevin Quiroz makes the best margaritas in the state, according to owner and manager Austin Bolter. A patron riding the rail concurred. A different infused tequila is featured each day, with flavors including cucumber/jalapeno and pineapple/orange. I'm going to try that again, actually. A different infused tequila is featured each day, with flavors including cucumber jalapeno and pineapple orange. For beer drinkers, there are 8 gelada concoctions to choose from. Large screen TVs are strategically placed throughout the ground floor to ensure you don't miss any of the sports action. A grand staircase leads to a showroom, stage, and dance floor upstairs. Monte Lobo held its first concert and dance there on Madame Lou Bunch Day, which Chief Tequila Officer Steve Bolter described as wild. The showroom with full bar and private party rooms are available to rent for birthdays, anniversaries, weddings, or other special events. For reservations, contact Austin Bolter at 303-582-5908. Monte Lobo's hours are from 11 a.m. until 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. On Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, they open their doors at 11 a.m. and close at 11 p.m. Management vows to remain open beyond its regular hours on all 7 days until the last customer leaves. Before we continue to the next article, a quick break. And now, some promotional announcements brought to you by the Mountaineer.
Looking for a unique advertising opportunity? The Mountaineer podcast may be a perfect fit for you. Our podcast reaches local listeners at least 3 days each week. We can create your podcast commercial for you, or you can submit your own. Contact Amanda McDonald for additional information. Her email is adsales@themountaineer.com, and her cell is 720-960-2900. Have you checked out the Mountaineer YouTube lately? We are very excited to have a videographer intern this spring, as well as Clementine Miller, who's been working hard to record some of our local events and meetings to share with you. Go check it out on the Mountaineer YouTube. Have you seen our 2024 Peak to Peak Visitors Guide? We have just launched our 2025 Media Kit for the next guide. Go to our website and click on Advertise to see the full media kit there. Spring is springing, and we all know that means the flowers will be popping out all over the place, reminding us of beautiful art. That also means it's time to start thinking about the 2025 studio tour. Go to our website and click on special sections to view the 2024 guide and prepare yourself for this year's edition.
Welcome back. Let's get into the next article. Colorado prepares after Operation Midnight Hammer by Christopher Kelly. Colorado. Operation Midnight Hammer began at midnight Eastern Time on Friday. As the early hours of Saturday, June 21st, 2025 began, over 125 aircraft, including 7 B-2 stealth bombers carrying the operation's main strike package, launched from the Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri. A small force was deployed over the Pacific, described as a decoy by General Dan Kane, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And at 5 p.m., a U.S. submarine launched Tomahawk missiles at key infrastructure targets at the first nuclear facility in Isfahan, Iran. At 6:40 p.m., fighter jets provided suppressing fire to allow safe passage for the B-2s to hit the second and third nuclear facilities at Fordo and Natanz. The stealth bombers dropped up to 14 GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator MOP bombs on their targets, each bomb delivering 30,000 pounds worth of explosives. After President Donald J. Trump announced the success of the attack on social media, the operation was continually promoted as a means toward preventing Iran from developing nuclear armament. For the entirety of his time in office, President Trump has consistently stated, for over 10 years, that Iran must not get a nuclear weapon, full stop, U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth said in a press conference the Sunday following the attack. Thanks to President Trump's bold and visionary leadership and his commitment to peace through strength, Iran's nuclear ambitions have been obliterated. When this president speaks, the world should listen. And the U.S. military, we can back it up. The most powerful military the world has ever known. No other country on planet Earth could have conducted the operation that the chairman is going to outline this morning. Not even close, Hegseth continued. The mission demonstrated to the world the level of joint and allied integration that speak to the strength of our alliance and our joint forces. As President Trump has stated, the United States does not seek war, but let me be clear. We will act swiftly and decisively when our people, our partners, or our interests are threatened. Operation Midnight Hammer comes off of the heels of Israel's initial attack on Iran, Operation Rising Lion, which targeted the Natanz nuclear facility on June 12th. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called the facility the heart of Iran's nuclear program. Retaliatory strikes would continue over the next several days, with Iran launching on Israel's military bases and civilian targets, causing the injury and death of innocent residents, as reported by Israel. Israeli forces have struck at a nuclear reactor in Iraq, have reportedly killed several of Iran's top military leaders and nuclear scientists, and have declared full air superiority over Tehran. This recent tension between Israel and Iran, which Netanyahu has said is about Israel's very survival, comes after U.S. talks with Iran about their nuclear program disintegrated back in April. A report from the global nuclear watchdog group International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, found Iran in breach of their non-proliferation obligations. The IAEA claimed Iran was guilty of many failures in providing accurate information regarding their undeclared nuclear material and a stockpile of enriched uranium, which IAEA has reported is 60% enriched, close to weapons grade, and is enough to produce 9 nuclear bombs. Following Operation Midnight Hammer, Iran fired back at U.S. forces, launching 14 missiles at the Al Udeid air base in Qatar, though not before warning the U.S. about the attack. 13 of the 14 missiles were shot down or deflected. Damage was reported as minimal, and there were no injuries. Though Israel continued to strike Tehran and access routes to the Fordow nuclear enrichment site, and Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has met with Russian President Vladimir Putin, President Trump announced on Monday, June 23rd, that a ceasefire agreement between Israel and Iran had been reached. Neither Israel or Iran had confirmed that announcement, which has already been broken. Since the Israel-U.S. military strike against Iran, Colorado officials have spoken out, and perhaps unsurprisingly, are split along party lines on the foreign escalation. Republicans Jeff Crank of Colorado's 5th Congressional District and Jeff Hurd of the 3rd Congressional District stood behind the president. Senator Michael Bennet, while not commenting directly on America's involvement, did say of the initial conflict with Israel that it was his belief that Iran should not have nuclear weapons. Representative Jason Crow of Colorado's 6th Congressional District stated his belief, shared by the Colorado Democratic Party, that the president's actions in executing Operation Midnight Hammer were unconstitutional. Based on what I know and have been briefed, there is no imminent threat to the U.S. posed by Iran, which means that under the Constitution and the War Powers Act, he was required to come to Congress to get approval, which he did not do, Representative Crow said about Trump in an interview with Rocky Mountain PBS. The decision to send American troops to war and to engage in war should be made by those closest to the American people, and those most accountable to the American people. Those are members of Congress that every week have to fly home and be accountable, answer tough questions, stand before their constituents in high school gymnasiums around the country, and say why we're doing this and why it's important to do. Colorado's Republican Party issued an official statement after Operation Midnight Hammer was announced as a success. These strikes not only demonstrated advanced American military capability, but they also reinforced our unwavering commitment to Israel and the broader stability of the Middle East, the party said. This action was not a war of choice. It was a defense of peace through strength, and the world is safer today because of it. Governor Jared Polis's statement on social media read, "I met with my public safety team this evening and directed that they coordinate with state, local, and federal partners and remain vigilant against all threats to Coloradans and the state's infrastructure and military assets." Polis added that the state's law enforcement agencies are actively monitoring for any heightened threats, echoing warnings issued on Sunday from the U.S. Departments of State and Homeland Security regarding possible heightened terrorist activity around the country. Such shades of domestic terrorism have already affected Boulder recently, including a string of anti-Semitic graffiti found across the CU Boulder's campus last year, threats levied against the city council, and continued meeting eruptions from pro-Palestinian protesters. The most violent action was the firebombing attack against marchers outside the courthouse who were remembering the Israeli hostages. History is told, but who's there to tell? By Christopher Kelly. Nederland. Nederland may be a town encompassed by natural beauty, but its true splendor lies in its community. All the hearts that beat for Nederland collectively beat together to pump lifeblood through the town's veins, revitalizing it. But as the town's population fluctuates, almost at a yearly cycle, so does its heartbeat. The ebb and flow of volunteerism can be felt as strongly as the change of seasons. Just as tourism's rise and fall causes a shift in local businesses' revenues, a fluctuation in volunteerism and other communal and philanthropic activities can cause strain on another of Nederland's major organs, the nonprofit sector. And now, on the crest of one of these oscillating waves, 2 dedicated volunteers are ending their service on the Nederland Area Historical Society's NAHS Board of Directors. But not before putting out a call to the community for more committed Hardts to join the mission. I feel like the Historical Society has a place in the community, but I have this feeling of a personal responsibility to maintain it, and I want there to be the capacity to turn people over, Emmett Hoyle confessed to the Mountaineer. He described how, at the end of nearly a decade of volunteerism with NAHS, he hopes to find like-minded people to carry the baton. We would love new membership and new individuals who would want to pursue projects on recent history and who have the willingness to make it happen. Jessie Ansari is another longtime volunteer with NAHS who, after more than 7 years serving on the board, is ready to pour herself into other endeavors. I like the stories, writing articles, doing research, and leading educational events. I'd like to focus more on that, Ansari told the Mountaineer. And my interest has always been more in the living history side of things, the demonstrations, miners' days, and that kind of stuff, Hoyle followed up. While Ansari and Hoyle each discussed plans to still be involved with NAHS in some capacity, they professed being ready to move on from their positions on the board, as administrative and executive work takes an entirely different dedication than the hands-on, boots-to-the-ground world of volunteering. It's hard trying to balance making plans for the future for the museum while also just trying to get volunteers for the summer. It's one or the other, Ansari told the Mountaineer. NAHS has experienced many changes over its 5 decades of operation. Some disappointments, including selling off some of its physical assets back in 2013, but also some major improvements, including the history-making acquisition and rescue of the beloved Bucharest Model 50B steam shovel. The town was very adversarial when the steam shovel was being moved in, Ansari mentioned. There was a huge controversy because they did not want it. It's interesting to look at the history of the Historical Society and think of the shoes they filled as they evolved, Hoyle said. In 1974, they were trying to preserve physical artifacts. They were building a collection, and they accomplished that. They built their museum and filled it full of stuff, but then they fell off and lost the ability to manage it. They shot for the moon and went too high, Ansari said. Then, in 2013, they made the decision to sell the mining museum to Boulder County Open Space because they knew that they had the taxpayer funding to support it and staff it and continue it moving forward. But the Historical Society had lost its home base, and now it's just kind of nebulous in a way. Ansari and Hoyle have championed several endeavors for NAHS over the years, working towards the organization's goals of historic preservation. This has included curating a physical collection of historic items, including digitizing historic records and photographs. They have also maintained the Society's physical assets, such as the Gillespie House Museum. They have been involved in organizing annual fundraisers, creating an original line of merchandise, and restoring both of the historic Nederland and Caribou cemeteries. NAHS is unique among Nederland's other nonprofit organizations, as its dedication to the preservation of local history represents both a physical reality, one that you can see and learn about, as well as an existential one, as Nederland's history informs its identity. But while town officials have focused on major initiatives that tout either preserving or outright visually representing Nederland's identity, from the downtown sub-area plan, the comprehensive plan, and the recent town logo redesign, there hasn't been much traction made on supporting historical preservation. People appreciate the history, and they say they value it, but then there's no movement, Ansari admitted. There are always ideas, but it all takes manpower. The town of Nederland has to rely on Boulder County in order to take any action on certain historic assets, including making improvements to either the mining or Gillespie House museums. Meanwhile, other actively dilapidating assets, like the Bryant House behind the RTD parking lot, have been neglected, despite Ansari and Hoyle making many presentations to all of the town's advisory boards and commissions over the years. Though there have been individual members of these boards, from the Nederland Downtown Development Authority to the Planning Commission, who have expressed interest in championing these causes, these boards ultimately chose not to commit resources to such efforts. And while the town's plans for suggested downtown redevelopment highlight Wolf Tongue Court as a possible historic district, the code changes actually being made at a municipal level involve allowing other uses, including residential use, on industrial zone property. The people of Nederland need to decide whether they value it enough to put their money towards historical preservation and potentially creating a historic district, because right now there are no historic protections that exist in the town of Nederland, Hoyle said. In these times of financial uncertainty, local nonprofits are all struggling to creatively navigate narrowed grant opportunities while seemingly competing for the same ever-shrinking pool of donors and volunteers. And while each revolution of new residents to the area may bring a few new interested parties, local organizers feel with each cycle that the limited availability of new unicorns is not enough to replace those dedicated volunteers who are aging out. It's a pretty small community of people who are interested, and there's a lot less commitment from our generation, Hoyle said, who is a young father of 2. Part of the issue at hand is that we're very spread out all over the place. We have some members who may step up to keep the entity going, but the part of the main mission here is we need more people to turn out. We need more volunteerism in order for it to be sustainable as an entity. Both Ansari and Hoyle believe that the future of the NAHS relies on creative partnerships and believe that the preservation of Nederland's history should be a municipal priority. Most historical societies have a formal tie to a government entity, and we don't. So, in some degree, we lack purview, Hoyle explained. With a lot of other historical societies, they receive government funding as a part of the district or as a line item in the city's budget, and we don't get any of that. We fundraise on our own. There are some things that would make a huge difference, like paying for the insurance and overseeing the volunteers at the museum, Ansari noted, referring to the insurance policy regarding the steam shovel. We're spending a large percentage of our budget on insurance policies, including this general liability policy for a public asset, maybe the second largest tourist attraction in town to the carousel, Hoyle said about the steam shovel. He added that the town won't take the responsibility because they do not own the asset. Ansari and Hoyle hypothesized that NAHS would thrive under a taxpayer-subsidized system, such as funding through mill levies, with the town of Nederland taking on the administrative responsibilities of running a program focused on historical preservation and heritage tourism. However, it was also noted during the interview that the town itself also suffers from the fluctuation in volunteerism, and just like many of the area nonprofits, has issues with high turnover rates on town boards, as well as with finding interested parties willing to join. With the number of applicants to vacant seats dwindling, and with tenured board members and those dedicated community members deciding to finally step down from their positions, these boards and commissions risk becoming ineffectual if they don't have the attendance to make quorum. Ansari and Hoyle workshopped several ideas for sustainability of the society during their interview with the Mountaineer, bouncing around ideas of NDDA funding, the possible creation of a recreation district as a funding source, and the potential acquisition of Eldora. Overall, they both believe that municipal engagement will breed more community engagement and give the NAHS the shot in the arm it needs to become a real commodity. They both dream of making the steam shovel a true Nederland asset, of having the town's support mold the steam shovel into an icon and a symbol, with the resources it needs in order to come alive and to hopefully let loose its loud whistle every weekend of the summer. But beyond mining equipment, Ansari and Hoyle believe there are more in-depth facets of local history that deserve attention. One of the things we've been talking about is getting a stakeholder meeting together, Ansari said. To get all the interested parties together in one room, I think we'd get some really good solutions. We've got 2 completely different communities here now, Hoyle explained. There's the group of old-timers and what brought them here and what they enjoy doing, and then you've got a younger population that gravitate around bicycles, and they're a very big community. So how do we tap into that history? That's part of what the Historical Society is. It's not just mining. We want to embrace all history. Ansari added, there's a lot of different histories to be told. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in to this audio library segment of the Mountaineer Podcast. If you're interested in subscribing to the Mountaineer to get news from peak to peak, then be sure to head to the mtnear.com and subscribe by clicking on the subscribe button in the top right corner of our homepage, where you'll get full access to our digital archives and scanned copies of our physical newspaper, as well as the option of sending a physical subscription to your mailbox or to the mailbox of someone that you love. If you're interested in being a part of the Mountaineer Podcast or the Mountaineer in general in any way, shape, or form, then email Barbara Hardt, our editor-in-chief, at info@themountaineer.com and or myself at media@themountaineer.com, and we'll get something sorted for you. Head to the mtnear.com/advertise today to learn what advertising opportunities are available. Scroll down near the bottom of the page or head to our podcast's main hub at the mtnearpodcast.buzzsprout.com to see a full archive of all of our episodes, and be sure to find all of our main links in individual podcast episode descriptions or on the top right side of our homepage. I'll see you guys next time for another episode of the Mountaineer Podcast. Have a great rest of your day.
And that's it for our show. Subscribe online to get more access to more news, weekly updates to our community calendar, and a link to our YouTube channel by visiting themountaineer.com. Be sure to use the coupon code PODCAST when subscribing for a 10% discount, only available to our listeners. If you are in the local Peak to Peak area, be sure to pick up a print edition of The Mountaineer at a local business. I'm Dango Rose. Thank you for listening.